St. Petersburg in the 1750s appears to us as a young but already influential European center. We find ourselves in the middle of the 18th century, during the reign of Empress Elizabeth Petrovna, when the capital had barely turned 50, yet was already claiming a place among the continent's great cities. Our journey begins at the Admiralty, the living heart of the Russian Empire's naval power. In those days, the shipyards never fell silent. The blows of hammers, the shouts of craftsmen, and the thick smell of tar mingling with the scent of freshly sawn timbers filled the air. Warships of the Baltic Fleet rise on the slipways, and work goes on without pause from dawn to dusk. The experienced shipwright Ivan Petrovich oversees the construction of a new frigate, directing the apprentices with gestures and voice, demanding precise fitting of the planking and sparing neither effort nor time. Then, the Admiralty was still primarily an active shipyard, rather than a merely administrative complex. Its famous spire already rose above the future building, but the architectural appearance of the structure would only be altered under Alexander I. Hundreds of workers make a din around. Some haul ropes, others coat hulls with tar, still others step masts and rig the yards. From the shipyard stretches the main axis of the city, Nevsky Prospekt, which in the 1750s had not yet become the grand boulevard we know today. Many buildings are still wooden, the pavements are laid with logs, and merchants rush along these awkward sidewalks with their goods, while noble carriages sweep down the avenue. Along the street march soldiers of the Preobrazhensky and Semenovsky regiments, bringing military discipline and order to the city's outward appearance. In one of the carriages rides the young Count Alexander Sergeyevich on his way to a court audience. His valet, sitting beside the coachman, carefully holds a small casket with a gift for the Empress. The Count studies the city through the window. He sees traders hurrying along the wooden pavement, peasants hauling firewood in sledges, and dandies in wigs and tricorns, leisurely eyeing shop windows. The fashion of the time astonishes with its pomp and luxury, turning a stroll through the city into a spectacle. Men are dressed in tricorns and richly embroidered coats, while women appear in gowns supported by structured frames that make the skirts extraordinarily wide, like domes. High society ladies wear wigs half a meter high, adorned with ribbons, flowers, and even miniature ships. We approach Palace Square. In the 1750s, the architect Bartolomeo Rastrelli is directing the construction of a new winter palace for Empress Elizabeth Petrovna. It is the fourth palace on this site, and it is the one that stands there today. Work is in full swing, and thousands of laborers are employed in raising this Baroque masterpiece. Masons and plasterers crowd the scaffolding, and below wagons laden. Rastrelli often visits the construction site, gives instructions to the masters, and insists on strengthening the gilding of the facade. By his design, the palace must outshine Versailles, he repeats to his assistants. The palace square in those years is completely different. There is neither the Alexander Column nor the General Staff Building yet. They will appear only 70 years later. The square serves for military parades and public festivities, and today an inspection of the Guard regiments is taking place. Colonel Pyotr Ivanovich, the soldiers stand like statues in dark green uniforms, their rifles gleaming in the sun. The colonel gives the order to begin the ceremonial march, and the regiment confidently files past the palace, behind whose windows the Empress herself watches. We cross to Vasilievsky Island. Peter the Great had intended to move the city center here. The plan was not fully realized, but the island became an important commercial and cultural hub. At the Strelka, trading is in full swing. Ships arrive from Europe, English, Dutch, and German. Merchant Semyon Grigorievich meets at the pier a ship from Amsterdam. The Dutch captain van der Meulen greets him and shows a list of goods: wine from France, fabrics from England, spices from the East. Semyon Grigorievich nods and carefully inspects the cargo. He bargains with the captain over the price, after which the men shake hands in agreement and go to the office to formalize the transfer of the goods. From Russian warehouses, timber, furs, and hemp are being loaded for Europe. Workers move bales and barrels onto the decks of ships moored at the quay. Nearby, another vessel is being unloaded, and stevedores carry ashore crates of exotic curiosities. The Strelka hums with voices in dozens of languages, And here one might meet a Russian, a German, a Frenchman, even a Chinese. Near this, it houses the Academy of Sciences, established in 1724. In the 1750s, outstanding scientists work within its walls. Mikhail Vasilievich Lomonosov leans over flasks in his own laboratory. He conducts a new chemical experiment. His assistant carefully records the observations in a thick notebook. Lomonosov explains the essence of the experiment and sets out his ideas about the structure of matter. In the adjacent room, astronomers prepare instruments for nighttime observations, double-checking and tuning the telescopes. In the Academy's library, the scientific secretary sorts through recent books sent from Paris and London. At a large table, geographers bend over maps of the empire and discuss routes for upcoming expeditions. Thanks to the Academy of Sciences, Saint Petersburg is becoming one of the fortress stands on Zayaki Island, its stone walls reflected in the waters of the Neva. Rising above the fortification is the Peter and Paul Cathedral with its famous spire. The cathedral spire is the tallest structure not only in the city, but in all of 122 meters, higher than many European cathedrals. At its summit stands an angel with a cross, a weather vane visible from any point in the city, and when the sun lights the gilded figure, it shines like a star. In the 1750s, the fortress lost its immediate military importance because Sweden no longer posed a threat. Nevertheless, a garrison remained, and the soldiers continued to serve on the bastions and patrol the surroundings. Every day, exactly at noon, all Petersburgers set their clocks by the cannon shot. Artilleryman Sergei Fyodorovich carefully prepared the noon gun, checking the charge and aiming the piece precisely. Beside him stood an assistant with an hourglass, and when the last grain fell into the lower bulb, the artilleryman gave the order to fire. The roar that echoed through the whole city served merchants and passers-by as an accurate time signal, and people, having checked their watches, nodded to indicate that it was indeed noon. The fortress was used not only for defense. It had since become a prison for especially important. A guard led yet another prisoner down a dark corridor, and beyond the thick walls, no sound from the outside could be heard. Those who dared to oppose the imperial power languished here, prisoners cut off from their accustomed lives by harsh isolation. Everyday life for Petersburgers at that time was different. The city was full of contrasts, where luxurious palaces stood alongside simple wooden houses. At the markets, one could find everything necessary: fish from the Neva and the Gulf of Finland, meat and vegetables from suburban gardens, and goods brought in from the depths of Russia. Market woman Maria sold fresh fish at Gostiny Dvor and loudly praised her wares to customers, pointing to zander freshly pulled from the Neva and to smelt she called especially tasty. Nearby, a butcher chopped carcasses, a baker arranged loaves, and a milkmaid poured. The city's population at that time numbered about 150,000, and it was home to Russians and Germans, Finns and Swedes, French and Italians. From its founding, St. Petersburg had been a multinational city, and in the German quarter, one could hear a dozen languages. German shoemaker Johann worked in his workshop on Nevsky Prospekt, and a Russian nobleman would drop in to order new boots for a ball. Johann showed the customer samples of leather and explained in detail which styles were in fashion. They quickly agreed on a price, and the nobleman left quite pleased with his purchase. Johann sets to work with a sense of confidence and skill. He is rightly considered the best shoemaker in the city. People moved around the city on foot, in summer boats were used extensively. Numerous canals cut through the city, and the water served as a convenient road. Ferryman Vasily rows his boat all day, carrying passengers from one bank to the other. At one moment, he will deliver a noblewoman across the Moika. At another, he will ferry a merchant to Vasiliev. In winter, the Neva, covered with ice, turned into a smooth track, and an ice route was laid, a sleigh road that ran straight across without detours over the bridges. Coachman Ivan drives the sleigh along the frozen river. The runners whistle and glide over the ice, and the passenger, wrapped tightly in a sheepskin coat, is sheltered from the piercing wind. Ivan urges the horse on. They must reach their destination before darkness falls. In the evening, the city is transformed. Palaces are lit by the glow of countless candles and seem to belong to another world. A ball is underway at the Empress's palace. Court ladies in luxurious dresses perform a minuet with their cavaliers. The orchestra plays, servants circulate with wine and light refreshments, and Empress Elizabeth Petrovna, seated on the throne, watches the spectacle. She loves balls and holds them several times a week. In ordinary homes, life flows more modestly and quietly. A craftsman's family gathers for supper. The mistress serves shchi and porridge. The master talks about the events of the day, and the children, obedient and attentive, listen at the table. After supper, everyone goes to bed. Tomorrow there will be work again at dawn. Religious life occupied an important place in the everyday life of St. Petersburg's residents. On Sundays, the church is filled with worshippers. The ringing of bells carried over the city and summoned people to the service. People came to pray, light a candle, and confess. The priest delivered a sermon, the choir sang, the congregants crossed themselves and bowed their heads in reverence. The city guard watched over order unceasingly. At night, patrols with lanterns walked the streets, checking locked shops and stopping suspicious passers-by. Those who disturbed the peace were immediately seized and taken to the guardhouse. Order in the capital was kept within strict bounds. St. Petersburg of the 1750s appears to us as a city of rise and change. Only half a century earlier, marshes stretched over this place, and now the majestic capital of the empire rises here, having entered into rivalry, Rastrelli's palaces, broad avenues, networks of canals and granite embankments. All this arose through the labor of thousands of people and the strain of the ruling power's ambitions. A French diplomat arriving in the city sends letters home full of admiration. He notes the singularity of Petersburg, a city, as if created at the command of a single man, built on marshland by the will of Peter the Great. In 50 years, a genuine European capital had grown here. According to him, the palaces rivaled those in Paris. The fleet was the foremost in the Baltic, and science and the arts were receiving. The Peter and Paul Cathedral still dominates the city. The Kunstkamera continues to occupy its place on the Strelka of Vasilievsky Island. The Winter Palace, despite alterations, has preserved the features set by Rastrelli. Nevsky Prospekt still stretches through the city, binding its parts together. Of course, much has changed. Wooden dwellings have given way to stone houses, plank walkways have been transformed into pavements of granite slabs, and new buildings, monuments, and bridges have appeared. The city grew and transformed, but the spirit of the era in which its foundations were laid remained palpable. Our imaginary journey through St. Petersburg of the 1750s comes to an end. We looked at the city through the eyes of its inhabitants. From the empress to the simple ferryman, saw how palaces were erected and ships launched, how trade bustled in the markets and prayers sounded in the churches, how scientists made discoveries and soldiers performed their duties. It was a city of contrasts, luxury and poverty, Europe and Russia, the old and the new intertwined at every turn. This was the place where Peter the Great's dream of a window open to Europe was realized. Here, on the banks of the Neva, in those distant years of the mid-18th century, began the history of a city destined to become one of the greatest capitals in the world.